Well, good morning, DEC members and guests, and happy Monday to all. I'm Steve Gregorian, President and CEO of the Detroit Economic Club, coming to you from lovely downtown Detroit, where the Detroit River, with the sun sparkling and on its way to 60 degrees, is looking fabulous. It's a pleasure to have you with us. Thanks for beginning your week with us. A couple of quick announcements before we get started. I do want to take a brief moment to thank the terrific DEC sponsors for their continued support of our mission. And you are seeing these companies on our screen. March and April at the DEC has something for everyone. So be sure to get your tickets for some upcoming events. Next Tuesday, March 16th, we're excited to be joined by Sheryl Sandberg of Facebook, talking about their support for small business. And if you're a March Madness fan, please join us on March 25th when we host ESPN bracketologist Joe Lunardi. That should be a fun meeting. And in April, we'll host Sunil Gupta on his new book, Backable, and former General Electric CEO Jeff Immelt also has a new book called Hot Seat. So get those on your calendar so you can join us if your schedule permits. You do already know how important it is to the DEC that high school and college students are included. And today we want to say welcome to students from Schoolcraft College, Osborne High School in Detroit, and Divine Child High School in Dearborn. The DEC has an incredible history of speakers, and our speaker today now joins a distinguished list of 21 other speakers who in our 87-year history have addressed the DEC on March the 8th. Beginning with the speaker all the way back to 1937 through today, this list includes traditional Fortune 100 CEOs, and also the famous American economist Milton Friedman addressed the DEC in 1971. And see if you remember these names. In 1979, from NBC Nightly News, we were joined at the DEC by Carol Simpson, Garrick Utley, and Chris Wallace, probably recognizable names. Today, we're pleased to add Nikesh Arora as our 22nd speaker on this day in DEC history. So let's get started. Our guest today was named Chairman and CEO of Palo Alto Networks in June of 2018. Prior to that, he held C-suite and executive positions at SoftBank Group, Google, and T-Mobile. He holds an MS in Business Administration from Northeastern University, go Huskies, an MS in Finance from Boston College, go Eagles, and a BTech in Electrical Engineering from the Institute of Technology at Banaras Hindu University. You know you're waiting for their mascot, and I'm just not that good. I'm sorry. So we're pleased that Nikesh would start his work week with us today, all the way from California. So let's say hello and welcome Nikesh to Detroit.
Good morning, Steve. Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure and honor to be part of this August discussion.
Thanks, Nikesh. So the topic you chose today was protecting our digital way of life. So let's get into it. It's hard to believe, but it's been 12 months ago when our lockdowns began. From your seat as CEO of Palo Alto Networks, you saw this urgent need, especially at that time, to securely connect remote workforces. Tell us how this has played out in all of the businesses.
Well, thank you, Steve. As we can all probably tell in hindsight, in the last 12 months, what's gone on is that the only part of most businesses that has been working is technology, whether it's planning our vaccinations, whether it's figuring out how to get stuff to us, whether it's groceries, stuff from Amazon, and even restaurants. You have to book them using online stuff. They don't want to have menus anywhere because they want to keep it as low touch as possible. So the moment you go into that environment, what we're seeing in the world over is what's working is technology. Now, technology comes with its, with its pros and cons. And one of the things which has become quite dangerous, as you and I were chatting earlier, there's been a big hack over the weekend as well. What's become quite dangerous is there are bad actors who are seeing this sudden surge in technology and trying to figure out how to create an economic opportunity for themselves, i.e. there has been a tremendous rise in cybercrime. And in our parlance, it's kind of like, it's very simple for us to understand. As you increase the attacks vector, the attack surface, we're all working from home. We're all using our laptops, our local Wi-Fi's. People are trying to access your company systems from all kinds of places because we're trying to get them to be online. That just increases the attack surface tremendously, allowing an opportunity for bad actors to try and insert themselves and create an economic sort of opportunity for themselves. And that's kind of been the surge in the last 12 months. And us and the industry have tried to work really hard to try and make sure that we extend the protection from the office to remote workers around the world, because people are working from everywhere, as you know.
Thanks, Nikesh. Coming out of the pandemic, hopefully, fingers crossed, we're hearing some companies will probably continue to have a significant remote workforce presence. What are you hearing from companies about how they plan to secure that permanent resource of a remote workforce? And what are some of the things that these companies are doing?
Yeah, Steve, you know what we did internally at Palo Alto Networks is we tried to get ahead of this problem. We obviously set up our own systems to be able to work remotely because we were protecting lots and lots of companies out there. But what we also did is we took a hard look at the future of work. And from our perspective, we realized, historically, we've all worked at the choice of the employer. We as companies have chosen when you must come to work. You must come to work 9 to 5. This is your office. Here's where you punch your card. And this is when you go back home, and here's some food, and here's some facilities. And what's happened is the pandemic has taught us is that it's in the future is going to be a balance between employer and employee choice. We have to create choice for all of us as individuals, and that's what we've done. And we're noticing a lot of people out there are going towards that as a new paradigm. And the new paradigm suggests that, hey, I'm going to work, but I'm going to work 3 days a week or 2 days a week from the office, and I'm going to work the remaining 2 or 3 days from home or from a convenient place where I can balance my personal life and my work life. And we've proven to the world that we can do that effectively and be productive. I mean, look at this. This would have required me to fly and come hang out with you, which I would have loved to, but this is extremely more efficient, right? So from that perspective, I think what's happened is we are going to go to this hybrid environment where people have to work from wherever is convenient, as long as they can deliver what we want as an enterprise. I think towards that end, we have to make sure that we extend the corporate network to wherever you are. So the edge of the corporate network has moved to the individual. It's no longer the physical manifestation of a campus or the physical manifestation of office. You have now virtualized the edge of an enterprise. Now you could have one leg in Indonesia, the other leg in India, the third leg in Detroit, and the fourth in California. And that just becomes your new corporate network. So that becomes an interesting challenge to protect, because now you're no longer protecting a fixed enterprise. You're actually going remotely to everyone. And that requires obviously leveraging technology, but also requires consistency. I think in the past, we've not been very consistent in our cybersecurity behavior as companies. And it's time that we all paid attention to it as an important sort of partner of technology.
Thanks. I want to shift gears a bit and talk about the Internet of Things, now that we're talking about protecting folks perhaps in their homes as well. But IoT devices are ubiquitous, and they're connecting to home networks and company networks, and that brings additional vulnerabilities. Talk to us about how companies are combating, addressing security issues around additional IoT devices.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, Steve, if you think about it, I can talk about it in the corporate world, but I can also talk about it in our personal lives, right? In our personal lives, 10 years ago, I used to work at Google, and people had email, but you never really thought of your email as somewhere where important stuff was. It's kind of email. Today, my mortgage emails are in there, my family pictures are in there, my any financial transaction I do is in there somehow because I'm communicating with someone. My taxes are in there. So there's a lot of information available today in our personal data stores. Even if you're not going to your Facebooks and your Spotify's of the world. Now, that's kind of similarly, companies have those as well. We all have our core jewels or core data that we have. What's interesting is people pay attention to protecting the laptop, protecting those core jewels. Now, what bad actors will do is they will try and use any new thing that's connected to your network to try and come in from there and then get to your core jewels. And similarly, what's happening in homes or in companies, the new surface attack vector is Internet of Things. At home, guess what? People are getting Pelotons, tonal machines, all kinds of these new machines. They're all connected to your Wi-Fi at home. If I was able to get into your computer through those things, that's a problem. And those are the IoT things we're talking about, whether it's your Ring or your thermostat. I think in the next 10 years, you'll find everything that has got a power source in your house will be connected to the internet. Think about that. You'll have 50 to 100 devices in your house connected to the internet because it has a power source that's more useful when connected. My wife bought us a weighing scale, which is connected to Wi-Fi, so it can upload my weight, which she constantly tells me I need to pay attention to. So I have it on my app. So my point is, anything that's got any battery, any power source is going to be connected. When that's connected, you're going to have the ability to come in through that vector back into where your core jewels are. So part of what we have to make sure is that as we go forward, not only are our core jewels protected, but we have to make sure that anything that gets attached to the periphery of our network is protected, because that is another potential attack vector into our core data.
It really is exponentially increasing, and you're scaring me a little bit. But before I'm going to add a add-on question to that. But I want to prompt our members and guests that are watching. In the final portion of this, we're going to take some audience questions. So use that function and throw a question in, and we'll see if we can address that with Nikesh. So let's go a little bit deeper into, Nikesh, securing our own homes. What should we be doing as homeowners now to protect ourselves?
That's a great question. I think, Steve, there's some basic hygiene things we all have to do. I'll tell you a funny story. One day I was on my Spotify account and I started seeing a music playlist which was set up. It was full of Czech songs. And I'm like, well, I don't speak Czech and my wife doesn't, and we both share the account. And I'm wondering what's going on. So I ran into the CEO of Spotify that evening. He happened to be in Silicon Valley, Daniel Ek. And I said, Daniel, I got these Czech playlists showing up in my Spotify. That's not normal, right? Like, no, that's not normal. You've been hacked. So you should talk to my head of security. So I called the guy, who was a lovely guy up in the Nordics, and he started laughing. He said, Mr. Arora, your password has been hacked for the last 3 years, and somebody in the Czech Republic has been using your account to listen to music. I think he no longer likes your music choices. He's decided to make his own playlists. So my point is, we, to protect ourselves, we've got to make sure that our accounts are secure, our passwords are appropriate, we're using multi-factor authentication. But even despite that, there's a bunch of hygiene things we have to do. Is we have to make sure that we're protecting our core data from being accessed. It's very hard to protect your home in today's world, and we're working on some solutions at Palo Alto Networks to be able to make that happen in the future, because we believe the home is the new attack vector where people are going to try and come in and try and get access to your data. There's an interesting, I'm sure you've heard of this terminology called ransomware, where people will take over your computer and want you to pay them back in Bitcoin in return for unfreezing your computer. Last, 2019, the average ransomware payment was $300 to $500. 2020, the average was $300,000. They've decided to go after high value targets, whether it's personally or professionally, especially unfortunately in this environment. They've gone after a lot of hospitals and a lot of pharmaceutical companies, trying to freeze them so they can then get them to pay them back. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to scare you. This is the world we live in.
No, I agree. Actually, it's funny. You mentioned the Spotify hack. Same thing happened to me about a year ago. I saw a bunch of playlists of Latino music, which is great, but I know I didn't do it. So I checked with my kids and my wife, and they're like, no, not me. So it turns out I was hacked as well. I want to turn our attention, Nikesh, to some specific newsworthy events. Over the last few months, headlines have been dominated by news of hacks. Especially, I want to talk about SolarWinds, with nation states going after government agencies and organizations alike. What can we learn from this experience and from companies that you're hearing from?
Yeah, it's SolarWinds, and now honestly over the weekend the Microsoft Exchange server hack. These are the two for the bad actors are what I would call a dream hack, because a dream hack is like getting a master key to everybody's company as opposed to breaking into your company. And what they've done is, SolarWinds is a piece of software, but effectively a device or a hardware and software solution that is used by thousands of organizations to manage their internal IT servers. And they were able to go hack into their code and put a sleeper agent in there. And that agent would call back and allow them to control it remotely. So that impacted 18,000 different companies around the world. And that way, they could cherry pick which companies they wanted or government entities they wanted to go after, and then go find whether they're patents, whether they're secrets of the trade, or they are specific information or embarrassing information of different kinds of people. So they basically had at their hands the opportunity to enter 18,000 different organizations. As of this past weekend, we've heard about the Microsoft Exchange servers being hacked, which are currently deployed in 60,000 plus enterprises. So there's been a big flurry of activity over the weekend where everybody's trying to figure out if their Microsoft Exchange servers are compromised or not. And if any of your people listening believe they have that situation, they should have their nearest cybersecurity company take a look at it, because that is a real potential vulnerability which has just been unearthed over the weekend, which is yet another nation state which is being held responsible. What's happened is, because that nation state did that, all the other bad actors are jumping on that wagon because they understand the vulnerability. So now there's more than one person or one entity that is now trying to chase down this vulnerability. The problem, Steve, is that cybercrime is a lot easier than physical crime. Physical crime, you got to show up at your house with a baseball bat and contend with you and me at our homes. Cybercrime, you can do it from your couch in some remote part of the world where we can't find you. So unfortunately, 2020 saw the most number of cyber attacks in the world. I think 2021, we'll be ready to surpass that between the middle of the year, because it's become a lot easier to go after your assets remotely, shut your companies down, try and take down something, try and steal information. I think we're going to see a lot more focus by the new administration. We're going to see a lot more focus by various nation states. This is the new warfare.
Perfect segue to my final question, Nikesh, before we go to some audience questions. But you talk about automation. Tell us how automation is changing the way that the attackers are going after our data, and how we need to use that same automation to stay protected.
That I think, Steve, that's the best question. You saved it for last, because look, it's today, bad actors can go, just like us, can go rent public cloud like AWS or Google Cloud or Microsoft or IBM, whoever, and use those cycles to come attack each company one at a time. So what happened on the weekend is they ran automation scripts against every Microsoft Exchange server to see if they could compromise it. They didn't have to go individually. They just literally ran automation script across 60,000 of them, because they could see their IP addresses from the outside, and they know it's a Microsoft Exchange server, and they can run automated scripts across everything to see if they can compromise it. And then they'd make a list of 10,000 potentially compromisable servers and then go attack them. So it's impossible, because literally today, the way many companies do cybersecurity is they'll find something, there'll be 4 analysts, they'll go investigate it. It's going to take them 27 days on average to figure out what happened. The bad actors are in and out in hours, and sometimes in minutes. So the only way to fight this is with automation. And the way to get it done is, kind of like, the SolarWinds situation, we were attacked at Palo Alto Networks, and we had SolarWinds servers. What happened was, we have a product which was sitting on the SolarWinds server, which tracks behavior with data. It watches the behavior every morning. This is what you do. And one morning, the SolarWinds server said, "Good morning, I'd like to go talk to a server in Russia." And our product said, "Wait a minute, that's not your normal behavior." It flagged the abnormal behavior and shut it down. So it was, in our industry, it's called a zero-day attack. We've never seen it before. This is the first time this is happening. But the only way you catch zero-day attacks is through watching anomalous behavior. And to watch anomalous behavior, you have to have a lot of good data to know what good behavior is. So to that point, the only way we're going to protect ourselves in the future is watching all of our data to see what becomes anomalous and shut down what is anomalous. Today's version of security is put a door everywhere, put a gate everywhere, put a badge everywhere. Right? This is what we do even in physical security. You have a museum, there's guards, there are badges, there's people have to follow rules. The other way of view of the world is when you have face recognition, you'll watch people's behavior and say, "Wow, that's abnormal behavior, shut it down."
Yeah, that's fascinating. I hadn't thought about the behavior aspect, so thank you. We've just got a few minutes left, Nikesh, and I want to give our members a chance to ask some questions. We had some emailed to us, and we've got some coming in real time on the audience Q&A function. So let me start with one that was emailed from Derek. Any thoughts on how a new administration could impact cybersecurity? For example, new laws and or regulations?
Yeah, you know, what's interesting, Steve, there's three things, and I've had explicit conversations with the new administration about this thing. First is, you know, our government processes are set up to take years to validate new products. And unfortunately, cybersecurity is happening today. If they had an Exchange server hack yesterday or a SolarWinds hack 3 months ago, you have antidotes which need to be approved yesterday to be able to deploy it across the enterprise. So we need to accelerate the adoption of new techniques, new technology in our government, because they're still running antiquated products and systems in many places because the process of approval is long. I think the second thing, which is kind of it becomes a bit of a challenge, because you know, if you have 40,000 different departments and everybody's allowed to go do security their own way, you're going to end up with 40,000 different outcomes or variants. And it's very hard to protect something when you walk in and you don't know how one entity is securing themselves. The DHS does it differently than the Department of Defense, then the CIA, then somebody else. So I'm saying, oh my God, how do I make sense? I have a resource crisis, and now to make sense of 40,000 different variants. So you have to become a little more prescriptive in security. And that's how you look at it. Look everywhere. The most secure nations are the ones which are most prescriptive in their security. So we run into this notion of being prescriptive and freedom of choice in how you execute security. So I think the new administration have to strike the balance between being a little more prescriptive and letting some degree of flexibility in that prescriptive nature of how to implement cybersecurity. And last but not the least, I think, you know, it's, as I said, there's old tools. We need to go upgrade them and to get them up to snuff to the current state of the art, and that's going to require investment. And I know there's a very large bill that is in process where the expectation is that that bill is going to help secure many of our digital fronts in this global war.
Thanks, Nikesh. We've got a question that came in real time from Siddharth. What's the biggest challenge that your clients are facing trying to accelerate digital transformation and innovation during this pandemic?
Great question. Again, you know, a lot of things can be done remotely. Some things require you to be physically present. And you know, given this time when only thing working is technology, it's very hard to try and transform it because you run the risk of disrupting yourself. Like if something doesn't happen, then you run the risk of bringing the entire business down. So our clients are trying really hard to keep that innovation and that transformation happening whilst making sure nothing breaks. And that's a tough challenge, especially working remotely, which is something we're all experiencing for the first time. So, you know, kudos to all those wonderful CIOs and technology professionals out there who are trying to balance this in the current environment.
I have a question here, Nikesh, from Armin. I'm going to take us back to our personal Wi-Fi's. In your opinion, as an online consumer, example, banking and finance apps, how effective is two-factor authentication to protecting our digital identities and online assets?
A lot better than not. I think that's a good place to start. Like, again, depends what your two-factor is. I have seen situations where people have been able to clone mobile phones. So if your second factor authentication is a text to your mobile phone, I've seen situations where phones can be cloned and texts can be hijacked. It all depends on, is it worth doing it to you? Because you know, security depends on how vulnerable you are and how much is at stake. But for most normal people like us, we should be able to be more secure with multi-factor authentication. Banks and financial services providers who deal with very, very sensitive information are very good about encryption. So it's very hard even after getting in somewhere to try and hack into your data. But yes, I think the current multi-factor authentication techniques should work.
Thank you. We've got a couple of questions, a number of questions actually about lack of diversity in the IT industry and the information security sector, where a good majority of the workforce is white and male. The question is, what can the industry do and what can Palo Alto networks do to impact this?
Great question, Steve. We took on this challenge about a year ago in earnest, not that we were not paying attention to it, but we're trying to make sure that 50% of our candidates that we interview are from diversity backgrounds. We've significantly improved our diversity and inclusion intake. Not only that, we are now working with thousands of colleges building a cybersecurity curriculum where we're training people in college to be better versed with cybersecurity. And we've, literally, I want to say it's in the thousands where we built the curriculum, where we're training underprivileged people, underrepresented minorities, diverse people, because part of the problem is we have a supply problem. The way to fix the supply problem is create more supply. So we're going deep down with working with colleges, creating cybersecurity agendas with diverse, inclusive, and vet backgrounds, try and get them to come and be part of the story. Most recently, we welcomed Dr. Helene Gale. I'm sure many of your members know her. She runs the Chicago Trust. She's going to join our board as our first Black member. So we're really excited. We have now 3 female members on our board. So I have 50% of my direct team is diverse. So we're working on it all the way from bottom up and top down.
Final question, Nikesh, and this comes from, you and I were talking before we went live, a book review in the New York Times about cybersecurity. Does a Pearl Harbor-like cyber attack, could that happen? And is that something that might keep you up at night?
Steve, I thought I'd scared you enough.
You did, but I wanted to finish on a dark note.
So the unfortunate answer is yes. And I think the evidence is in the last 2 hacks we just saw. You saw the SolarWinds hack, you saw the Microsoft Exchange hack, which means the bad actors can get into our systems across multiple organizations. Now, it doesn't take a genius to figure out if they happen to get into PG&E in California, which is our electricity system, and if they got control of the reins, they could shut down electricity in the state of California. You can go do the math from that, saying if there are 4 or 10 or 20 critical systems that people can shut down remotely in our country, you can end up in a situation. And I think, honestly, we believe that the next war is going to be a cyber war because it's much more convenient and there's a lot less loss of life involved in conducting a cyber war. And that's why, if you look in the last 10 years, nation states have been gearing up their offensive cyber capabilities. And actually, it's a lot easier to build offensive capabilities than defensive capabilities. So the task of protecting a nation is much more expensive and complicated and requires tremendous amount of coordination compared to hiring thousands of best hackers, putting them together and saying, go find every vulnerability in that direction. So it's an unfair battle. And I think in the unfair battle, there's a risk that the winner is going to be the person who has better offensive capability. But from a defensive capability, I think it's very important. All of us have to build that. And we call this cyber resilience. You have to make sure that if things go bad, you're not fully incapacitated. You've got to make sure that you have enough segmentation going on, enough protection in place that you can get away with minor damage or in pockets, as opposed to, don't leave the keys to your house on the, front door table where somebody can fish them out from your dog hatch. So I think that the key is you got to make sure that we're prepared for it from a segmented cyber resilience point of view. But
I want to finish. Yeah, thank you. I want to finish on a more positive note. We've got 30 seconds. Something in your world of cybersecurity that gives you hope.
What gives me hope is that whilst we've seen these things, most people who are technologists are paying attention to the topic. Most people are working hard towards making sure that this resilience exists. And I still believe in the goodness of mankind.
That's terrific. Well, Nikesh, I can't thank you enough for starting your week with us, starting your morning with us. Thank you so much. We wish you the best. Let us know if we can be helpful here in Detroit. And we look forward to, we do want to host you in person sometime soon when it's safe to do so. So thank you, Nikesh.
I look forward to it, Stephen. Thank you very much once again. It was a pleasure and an honor.
Pleasure was ours. And a special thanks to some folks on your team, John Wilson locally here in Detroit, and Abby Tatton and Kevin House out there with you in Santa Clara for their efforts on making this happen. Thanks to my team and for all of you members for continuing to support the Detroit Economic Club. Your membership is very important to us. So have a strong week, stay safe, get your vaccine when it's available to you, and we hope to see you next Tuesday when we host Sheryl Sandberg. Goodbye, everybody.